Euthanasia is the act of deliberately ending someone's life to relieve suffering. It's only legal in a handful of countries, and the exact laws in these countries tend to vary. In the UK, euthanasia is considered murder or manslaughter depending on the exact circumstances. It carries a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. However, attempting to end your own life is not considered illegal in the UK. One of the largest ever conducted surveys in Great Britain shows that 84% of people actually agree with assisted suicide and want the laws to be changed, provided the person is terminally ill and they've got mental capacity. Alex, tell me about your diagnosis and also how you came to the decision that this is what you would like for your future.
I've always, well, when I say always, for the last 25, 30 years, I've always supported the right for people to choose to have a humane assisted death at a time and choice of their making. That was also informed by, I took 5 years out of work to support my father, who was diagnosed with MSA, multiple system atrophy, and then he later developed related dementia. Now, he suffered with MSA and he suffered with the dementia. He was tortured by the state, who insisted on just giving him tablets every now and then and pursuing that suffering. He lived 5 years, and I don't use the word torture lightly, but it was against his will. It was physical pain, it was psychological pain, it was emotional pain, primarily for him and secondary for those around him. So that again just kind of stoked up my belief in it. I used to be an avid walker and cyclist, long distance, and unfortunately, just in the turn of the century, I developed gout. And I've started to look, because of that, my body's deteriorated. And I'd already made a decision that when I got that way that I couldn't move myself about and be independent, I would make that choice, because I can make that choice. Unfortunately, not everybody can.
Yeah.
Round about early on in, but perhaps last round of 2014-15, I started noticing I wasn't completing tasks right. I was having problems with writing. I mean, I used to write for a living. I'd be providing feedback for students, and they'd be sending me letters back saying, I can't make head and tail of this, and nor could I. So at that stage, I thought, well, it could be a number of things. I have a B12 deficiency, that can lead to problems like that. So I had a 2-year period of chronic anxiety.
Yep.
That could have, presented similar things. I was just on, I think I'm on about 9 or 10 tablets. So the counterindicators could have been causing it. And of course, it could have been dementia.
Yeah.
So after a while, I decided to go to the GP. He asked me what I thought it was. I outlined what I'd said to you. Then he gave me the standard memory. He said, well, look, what we'll do is we'll get the bogey out of the way, so to speak, the bad one. We'll assess you for some form of dementia. And then we'll work our way through until we find out what the problem is. So I took the standard memory test. I scored abysmally on that. He referred me, I'm unlucky where I live. I hate to say it, but there's a postcode lottery when it comes to National Health Service.
Yeah.
I'm in the right postcode, LA1, it's in the middle of Lancaster, it's fine. He referred me to the memory clinic. Within 3 or 4 days, I got a phone call back from a male nurse, and he just introduced himself, went through it, gave me the assessment, again, scored abysmally on it. And he said, we'd like you to come in a week today, that's the following Thursday, I'd like you to go for a scan. And then on the Friday, we come into the memory clinic, which I did all that. And when I got to the memory clinic, I took another memory test. I was met by Vicky, a female nurse. She did an assessment with me. And I was then asked to wait. So I hung around for about 20 minutes. Then I was told by Vicky, would you come in and see the consultant? So I opened the consultant's door. There was already one nurse sat down. And Vicky was very clearly coming in and sitting down. So that's there is something.
Yeah.
So I sat down, and the guy said to me that it was just like kind of trying to break the ice, and I've always been quite pragmatic. I said to him, I think you need to get to the point with the diagnosis. What's the outcome of the diagnosis? They said, "Are you by yourself?" So I said, "Yes." So I'm by myself. Well, why? So I said, "Well, because I choose to be by myself. And secondly, I wasn't told I needed to bring somebody with me." So I said, "So what kind of dementia have I got?" He said, "Well, you've got Alzheimer's." So I said, "Okay, right, thank you." Now, this is the worst possible part of my diagnosis that's going to come. Not the diagnosis itself, but he said to me, "Are you okay?" So I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." I said, and I just said to you, "I'm a pragmatist." I said, it's not a problem. And he said, "Well, is that it?" So I said, "Well, look," I said, I've been a long-term supporter of humane assisted dying. And because of my gout and the way that my body is impacts on my body, I knew sometime I would be going to Switzerland. And all this has done is sharpened it up. I said, I'm a member of Life Circle. It's another organisation. As Sarah mentioned, Dignitas is also a Life Circle. So I'm already a member, so I just put an application forward. Now, this is the worst part of it, and this is the only part of anger I've had over my diagnosis. He then said, "I am also diagnosing you as depressed."
Wow.
Yeah. So I took a breath and I said, "You're diagnosing me as depressed?" And he said, "Yes." I've got enough sense to tell a psychiatrist that I'm not depressed. It means they're going to be denial, isn't it?
What was he basing that on?
Well, I'm assuming, because, well, this is what I'm coming to. I'll come to it in a second. So I said to him, I wasn't aware that I'm depressed. I said, given my circle of friends, I said, I'm highly surprised because of their backgrounds and my own, that this hasn't been spotted before. I said, but that can happen. And I'm also aware that the last person who noted depressed can be the actual person. I said, but it's not something, I'll accept that as we sit here, just in the interest of progress. So he said, I would like to diagnose medication. So I said, okay, fine. He said, but I want to treat the depression and I want to treat the Alzheimer's, but I can't treat both at the same time because both sets of medication, there can be strong reactions to, and I wouldn't know which one was causing it. So I'd like to treat your depression first.
Wow.
So, okay, so I said, right. I said, I'm sorry, but I don't agree with you.
Yeah.
He said, well, what do you mean you don't agree with me? So I said, well, let me put this to you. I said, if I am suffering from depression, I said, I can go back 20 years in my life and there's been lots of transition and lots of change and not all pleasant, but hey, that's life. I said, within that period, I cared for my father who had an horrific death. For a period after that, I didn't have an identity because I didn't quite know what to do with myself. So I had to relaunch me into my career. So there were a number of jobs which weren't particularly ones that I relished, I liked. And then I eventually set up medication consultancy up. And I've been having this, what's wrong with me? Why can't I write? So I genuinely believe that all that could bring about some form of reactionary depression. So he said, well, yes, that's possible. I said, but that doesn't mean you're not depressed. I said, no, I'm not saying it. I'm just saying this is how I think. If I am depressed, I think this is where it's come from. And as far as I'm aware, as in terms of the treatment, as far as I'm aware, there are some tablets that you can prescribe for the Alzheimer's that you think, and you only think, might slow down some of the symptoms. I said, now, I'm happy to take that might, and I'm happy to take that might from tomorrow morning. I said, I was being dragged down the river by a current, and there was a piece of straw hanging out, I'd grab it. I said, so there's nothing else that might slow it down. I said, in terms of the depression, I would argue quite strongly that the talking therapies are an alternative to taking antidepressants, etc. Yeah. And if you do wish to treat it, then my preference would be talking therapies for the depression and medication for it. And incidentally, doctor, does that sound like a man? Does that reason, that rationale, and that articulation sound like a man that is depressed? And he wouldn't even answer that. So I rather suspect, which is appalling for a man with your education, the fact that I've spoken about an assisted death, said you have mistakenly confused that with what I believe you would call dark thoughts.
Hopelessness,
and
yeah.
suicidal tendencies. I don't even make any more of a fool of yourselves. Is any paperwork that needs signing, and I bid you farewell. And that's the most appalling part of my diagnosis.
I can't even believe that story. You know, there's just so many things wrong with what he did. You know, and if someone, so you're the expert in how you feel. No one can tell you how you feel. And if someone is saying, you know, my mood is fine, I'm not hopeless, I'm not depressed, and they're not looking for the opinion on whether they're depressed or not, you never asked for that opinion, then you can't just hand out diagnosis willy-nilly. The only reason to hand out a diagnosis is to help someone and provide treatment. And, you know, and you were not even mentioning depression. But yeah, I think you did an amazing job of pointing out that the reason you're getting so confused here, doctor, is because you think, because I've mentioned suicide, you think that's a sign of my hopelessness, which therefore would be depression. It's quite infuriating, really, and so poorly managed because of his lack of awareness or his own opinions about when someone actually wants to has made that decision that actually in the future they will end their life rather than going through further suffering. Sara, you have been through a story with your husband who has chosen to end his life in this way. So I'm really curious to hear about your journey and what's happened.
Birthdays. We married on the 8th of the 8th, 88. And we had our 2 rescue dogs at the registrars, and it was very small, and it was just magic. Amazing. And then we were just together, and we've always been politically on the same side, environmentally, everything. We're both animal rights. He ran animal aid, and he was an extremely brave and uncomplaining man. He spent those last 7 months, he was in terrific agony.
So tell me about the decision-making process and how he came to make that decision, and then what the process was like.
Well, we were at supper, he and I were sitting down, and he looked, he broached it sort of, he was slightly embarrassed and kind of nervous, and he said, I've thought of every which way to commit suicide. Mm-hmm. And he said they can all go horribly wrong. And I can end up in hospital on life support and God knows what else. I've downloaded everything about Dignitas. What do you think? And we'd always talked about life has to be about living it, not just existing in it. And I said, of course, I go along with everything you say. Now, this would have been about 1.5 years, 2 years before he died. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so we went ahead. He became a member. I'm now a member as well. And that started the ball rolling. You know, because you do it all slowly and in the time that you need. And eventually he got all the documentation that Dignitas needed. Not so much for themselves, because they're fantastic, but the authorities, you know, they're trying to make it as hard as possible. Mm-hmm. So the more they're demanding, the more and more stuff. I mean, for instance, he had to have all his teeth x-rayed.
Wow.
I know, because that makes their life easier when the police come. Because after you've died at Dignitas, the police are called so that they can verify that you haven't been murdered. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so Andrew had to go to the dentist and say, I want all my teeth x-rayed. And they go, why do you want that done? And because he had that kind of authority and gravitas, he just said, I just do. Mm-hmm. And also he got all the documentations that he needed, the medical papers out of the doctor, by saying I need it all for retirement purposes from my job.
Okay.
What you do if you're 85, I don't know. But because he was 70, 69, 70, it was still plausible. Do you see what I mean?
So he felt he had to kind of lie to the doctor to get
yeah,
all
you
of
have
the
to. Oh God,
documents.
you have to. There's no option. I mean, they are absolutely. They make the doctors, even if they agreed, they're terrified that they will lose their job. It's a catch-22. On the one hand, the medical profession is so quick to say, we can't do it because it's against the law.
Yeah.
And I know it's against the law because the sort of staid establishment medical people, like from the BMA, they whisper in the politicians' ears, don't allow assisted dying. MPs will always, in the end, do what the powerful lobby groups tell them.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be a real rebel to stand against this powerful, highly regarded profession. And the younger medical people, I assume, are too terrified to say anything. And the few who do usually are retired or they do it anonymously. I mean, I read an article not that long ago from 5 palliative care doctors, but they said, there's no way we can give you our names.
Yeah. I want to understand the process of him having to try to make the decision to do it while he was still well enough, because I understand this is a very complicated part of the process, that he has to be well enough to be able to fly over to Switzerland. So could you tell me a little bit about how he came to make the decision that now is the right time when he did actually fly to Switzerland?
I think the suffering, the pain, I can't cope anymore. The Parkinson's medication it was brilliant for 5 years. Because for the first 3 years, Andrew was in denial about it, and he would shake and shake. And eventually I said, you have to see a neurologist. I said, it's ridiculous. I said, I'm going to have to start feeding you. So he did go to a neurologist, who immediately, basically said, you've got Parkinson's. He went on the tablet that he was lucky that suited him right from the beginning, because apparently a lot of people have to try this, or this. And it worked. And so he carried on working. And then over time, after that first 5 years, incrementally, he was getting worse and more stronger tablets, and it was just getting more and more side effects. I can't, there's such a long list. I mean, the worst one, I suppose, was no sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking perhaps 3 hours a night, but not in one fell swoop. And then his feet swelling up, and then his hands swelling up. But it was his back, the crumbling vertebrae. I mean, he couldn't really sit for long. He couldn't stand for long, and you're shaking as well. And he just, I don't know how he said, I think I'll be ready in November. And so I said, okay. I mean, I went along with everything he said. I didn't weep and all this stuff, because it just seemed so sensible what he was doing. And then he said no, and he held off a bit more. And then I can remember he said, I'm ready to go in April. So we organized a date. He spoke to them. They had, by the way, you have to pass this quote green light. So you sent all your stuff, in our case, to Dignitas. They have their doctors, the ones who do back what they're doing, read through all the stuff to make sure that, you are actually as ill as you say. He was then sent the green light, And the relief of that.
Yeah.
On the one hand, for a couple of days after he got the green light, he was all shaky and he said, oh, it's quite nerve-wracking. And I said, well, it will be, because you've got a date to die, basically.
Yeah.
You've got the go-ahead to die. So obviously you're going to find, it's going to take a toll on you. After that, he was just so relieved. Funny enough, a relative got in touch with me of his through Facebook, and it transpired his grandfather had Parkinson's as well, which of course neither of us knew, and of course Andrew never did know. So it was a familial thing. And once we settled on a date, he phoned Dignitas and said, this is the actual date, and you have to be there 2 days beforehand, because the doctor has to come and visit you on consecutive days to double check. He was a lovely young man, quite stressed, because so much of the medical profession are calling him a murderer.
Yeah.
He felt he was an executioner. And Andrew said, no, you're being an amazing friend. You're helping me. And he writes out the prescription for the barbiturate. I can't be bothered looking up. I looked it up, the long name. It's then given to the wonderful people who are going to be with you, so that they can administer the when I say administer, I mean they can hand Andrew. They go to the chemist. They get the barbiturate. You go to the Dignitas house, which was a lovely little house. Again, you're asked so many times, is this really what you want to do? And Andrew goes, oh, so absolutely, yes, this is what I want to do. And they mix up the potion, and then he drank it. And it varies very much, apparently, how long it actually takes your heart to stop. You soon out of unconscious, but he had such a strong heart. It took about 4 hours. It can apparently take 20 minutes. But you're obviously very, very sad that you're losing someone you love. But having been a campaigner since and seen the horror, or saying, read comments, the horror that people see, how long it takes in this country. This is where I have been so lucky. I have not had to watch somebody deteriorate so appallingly and screaming out in agony to die.
So it was very sad for you in that moment, but did you also feel that it's nice that he's been able to take control over the situation?
God. I can't tell you. The last thing that he would ever have wanted, and I certainly never want, is being in a hospital, being kept alive. What for? There was a professor recently who had to fly from Australia to Switzerland, and he was in his hundreds. I think he was 103, and he was completely sane, normal man who'd had enough.
Yeah. Did you feel that the grieving process was easier for you because you'd planned it and because you saw that actually this was his decision and that you got to have control over his final day, compared to how your grieving process would have been if you had to watch him in such a worse condition and going through so much more pain?
Oh God, I mean, there's no comparison to I could come home and immediately do what he asked, which was to start campaigning.
As I'm aware, you have to be well enough to fly to Switzerland. So when do you think you kind of might get to that point of making this decision?
Thank you, Sarah. It's really different. I think when people have got things like cancer, I think you can get a scientific measure of when you need to go in terms of this is deteriorating, this medication is no longer happening. And I think you can live a lot longer. The unfortunate thing when you've got neurological disorders like Andrew did with Parkinson's or I have with Alzheimer's, is you've got to have capacity when you go, and that's the juggle. Now, I applied immediately to Life Circle, which differs slightly because at Life Circle, it's an intravenous drip, and you do die within minutes. You know, and nobody lasts more than 2 or 3 minutes. And doesn't taste as bad. I don't know what Andrew was going to say.
Sara, at this point, could you tell me this comment that, because it sounds like Andrew had a bit of a sense of humour. What was the comment he made when he was taken?
He said to me before we went, he said, I think I might say, now he had a fantastic dry Jewish sense of humour, as do his 2 brothers. Funnily enough, so does my son, even though he's not Jewish. But he said to me, I think I might say to them, I'll take a sip and I'll say, oh, this tastes awful. What are you trying to do? Kill me? And I said, you can't say that. I said, and the Swiss speak such beautiful English, better than we do. And but he did say it. He did, because I said that they may not understand the nuance of what you're saying, but he did say it, and I can't remember. To be honest, I can't remember if they grinned or not. And the last morning, the only thing I feel guilty about is Andrew said, can I wear my slippers down to the dining room in the hotel we were in? And it was ever so posh. And I said, no, you've got to wear your normal shoes. And now, of course, I think, why on earth? Who cares? If he wanted to wear his slippers. So I feel bad about that.
And it sounds so beautiful to pick the music that you want to listen to, put yourself into a relaxed state, wear your slippers to dinner if you want on your last day. Like, all of this control actually is just so, the way I think of it is just so beautiful compared to actually not having any control over how you spend your last day and your last moment. Andrew, I want to come back to you, and I want to ask you about sort of, because it is a neurological problem and you have to try to figure out, sort of when to go, and, you have to be well enough, but also unwell enough. So what's your thoughts on trying to come to that decision?
Well, when I applied for an unspecified date, which you can do. I think what people need to really, really understand and know is places like Dignitas, Life Circle and Pegasus love life, love the quality of life, and they're not keen for people to go for dying's sake.
No.
So that's an important point to make. And I had mine open, so I applied, and the application went through fine after maybe 6 or 7 weeks before I got the green light. And what I said it's Erica Priestley is the president of Life Circle, and Erica will be helping me in my life eventually. And I said to Erica that what the doctor said is that I have somewhere between 5 to 6 years to live.
Oh, good.
And after that, I could live for 9, even 10 or 11 years. But after that, I wouldn't know who I was, who I am, or what's going on. So I said, okay, that's fine. So on that premise, I initially thought, so it was 2015, I thought, well, okay, so we've got 5 years and things may go wrong. If I set a date for 3 years, then it'd be fine. So it was 15, 16. So initially it was the end of 2018, 2019. And that came along, and I was I was probably better then than I was 12 months beforehand. So I deferred that. And what I've said to Erica is that what I will do is I'll take a annual rolling date. So I've never set an exact date when I would be going. So presently it's somewhere towards the end of this year to the beginning of next year. But if I'm like this, it won't be taking place.
Yeah.
But what I've clearly got to do is, because I can't ask other people to judge me, I'm not going to put it on someone else's toes. You tell me when I'm getting just too batty or things are going wrong. So I've set a number of things up for myself. So language, I've lost a lot of language, but I seem to be evening out more. So that's not a problem.
When you say evening out more, what do you mean by evening out more?
Leveling out. It seems to have got to a level where it's deteriorated, and now it's stopped. Mm-hmm. So, for example, we could be talking about something 2 or 3 minutes later. It's very unlikely I'll remember what goes on. Mm-hmm. I find extreme difficulty in groups.
Yeah.
I used to be a very active teacher, so it was all group work and it was all interactivity and learn from each other, and I would kind of facilitate that process. But I can't do with that now. I can speak one-on-one, but more than that, I have extreme difficulty with. But that seems to have leveled out. I have trouble because people think Alzheimer's is about memory, and it's anything but. It's more about perception and that cognitive ability to process information in the first instance. It doesn't even get to short-term memory. You've not got an else chance of it getting to long-term memory on that basis. And occasionally I see things, it's just that distortion. Mm-hmm. So I could be looking over there now and I see a book on the wall, but sometimes I can see figures and I can see shadows, I can see things dancing, and that's okay. Because I used to pay a lot of money to get like that at one stage in my life. It was less dementia, I say. So it's this kind of thing. Now, the most noticeable thing that's happened to me over the last few months, so that's been going on more or less since diagnosis. After diagnosis, and this is very important, after the green light, my quality of life improved. Because up until quality of life, every time I woke up and every minute of the day was spent thinking about how am I going to die and how am I going to get around this. And if I don't get the green light, what am I going to do? How am I going to end? I mean, I'm fundamentally opposed to suicide on the basis that most are horrific, violent acts that don't succeed. And if they do succeed, or even if they don't, it's the poor people that have got to come behind you and clean that up. So I was spending my time, how can I do this clean? How difficult, it's fairly easy in Manchester to pick up heroin. It's not that difficult to overdose on it. But even that's not a pleasant death. And, so that's what my life was around. But once I got the green light, I stopped thinking about how am I going to die and got on with doing what I've done since I can remember, being selfish and thinking about what can I do.
So actually just
You're not selfish.
Having that green light meant you could actually start focusing on quality of life again and actually enjoying.
I've lost out of control, yes. I've lost so much control. And then what I decided to do with the Alzheimer's was, it's taken me, because of the kind of thing of, the 60s were wonderful. I thought those 60s were a great time, that's when we first started thinking about who are we, how do we become, how can we be, and everything. And I've always liked myself. I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I've worked my way through things. And the other thing I had to do was, okay, what I've got to do now is accept my Alzheimer's as part of me. And if it's part of me, I can't dislike it. Mm-hmm. And I don't have a partner. And I've treated it like a relationship. Yeah. And like every single relationship, there's never 100% equality in a relationship. Yeah. Bad hair day and you're down, So, and the way we perceive things, never mind someone being abusive to us, it's the way we perceive it. Yeah. So I work on that basis that, sometimes my partner, dementia, has control of the situation. Sometimes I have control of it, and then every now and then we have equilibrium. So it's.
I think that's an amazing way to see it, and I think it's really. The acceptance thing, I think, is beautiful, because actually trying to fight it and not accept it is, people will put themselves through mental torture. But I really do like that. Yeah, no relationship is perfect, and relationships are hard work, and you have to like really work on them, and then they can get easier. So how are you today? So I'm just kind of curious, like at the start of this interview, do you remember what Sara was speaking about, or is that something that even you haven't retained that information?
No, I mean, I can, because I know Sarah. I know Andrew, because I've listened to Sarah a lot, because I really respect Sarah and the work that she does, and I read everything that she puts out, and we have the odd, well, we message quite a lot. So I'm very familiar now with Andrew's story, because it's you know, when I say repetition, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It's like learning, isn't it? The more you repeat it, the more you hold it. So I can hold things on. So I'd probably better tell you things that Sarah said, but that I don't want to be based on what I know rather than
got it.
You know what took place. I don't know what I had for breakfast or lunch today. I do know I've had it because, much to my annoyance, I now leave my pots out until the end of day. So if I've had breakfast, whatever I use for that, I keep in the bowl. Then lunch, and after I've had the evening meal, I would rather happily clean up. But then I know.
Yeah, you've got a reference point.
I've got a reference point.
Here's a question for the two of you. So if someone is considering this as an option for themselves, what kind of advice would you give to them?
If you're somebody who fears suffering horribly, doesn't want indignity, doesn't want somebody controlling your body, then, go for it. But if you're somebody who feels you can, and you've never felt out of control, and even you'd feel control even if you were in a hospice and people were not giving you quite enough medication, and you could, bear the pain, if that's your choice. I'm all for choice. This is the thing. The anti-brigade seem to be incapable of understanding that we do not want everyone to have an assisted death, that we want people to have a choice. And as Alex has said, it's the minute you know that you have control, like when he got the green light, as did Andrew, you can put off that date as long as you like. And many, many never go to Switzerland.
If someone approached me about that, I think the first thing I'd have to say to them is, are you in a privileged situation?
Because it's
expensive. If you're in a privileged situation, you can afford at least £10,000, then an assisted death is available for you. If you're in the majority of this country, the most socio-economically deprived, then no option does exist. I'd also ask them to think very, very long and hard, that they need to reflect themselves. What is it that I don't want? What is it that I don't want to experience? And what is it that I want to experience? And I'd also say to them that this is something that you need to discuss with your family. It's something that you need to involve them with as much as you possibly can, but only once you've made your mind up. One person should be making this decision, and one person only, and that is you. The other thing I'd say to them is, if you are in that privileged situation and you can afford it, and you are going to go down that track or not, then come and join us in campaigning in the UK. We have a Facebook page, Right to Die with Unity UK, that Sarah has a lot of input to. Come and join us on that. There's an organisation called My Death, My Decision in England, Friends at the End in Scotland, who, like Sarah and I, campaign for a very inclusive model of assisted dying. Now, we used to always campaign for Switzerland, but the changes in Canada have made that a much more beneficial and inclusive model. And I said to them, in that process, come and join us and help us change the law.
What have the changes in Canada been?
In Canada, they had a very good act, and right at the last minute, somebody moved an amendment, and the amendment was death is reasonably foreseeable. So we have a campaign group in this country called Dignity in Dying, and they campaign for assisted deaths for anybody that's got a terminal illness and less than 6 months to live. Well, there's a couple of issues with that for me. I will die from Alzheimer's. Andrew would have died from Parkinson's, but neither of them are considered terminal illnesses. So that's one problem with it. And when have you got 6 months to live? My mum, 5 years ago, after experiencing really, really bad brain damage, was sent home. So 5 years ago, I don't know what I said, 5 years ago, my mum was sent home to die. And I'm going to see her tomorrow. She's still alive, living. Unable to communicate very little, screaming out in pain constantly, not able to make any decisions, and living against her will. So there's this issue as well, isn't it? So now in Canada, anybody with a terminal illness, or any person that has got I just can't remember the word for it, but like a neurological disorder, a degenerative condition. Sorry. Anyone that has a degenerative condition who will die from it can have an assisted death. And the difference between, which is very similar to Switzerland, but the difference in between Switzerland and Canada now is that Sarah outlined Andrew, the way Andrew took the drink, and outlined how mine's intravenous drip with the slide on it, so I administer it. But in Canada, we also have physician-assisted dying. So the physician can come along, they inject a first injection that goes in is a very strong tranquilizer, and then they inject the final dose of tablets that leads to that person's humane death, which is a great step forward, because there was a number of polls that have taken place. I mean, My Death, My Decision, you can check up on their website for the facts. They did a poll not so long ago. I think it was something like 85% of the population in the UK said that there was in favour of medical assisted deaths for anybody, including people with neurological and degenerative conditions. And when people asked about how would you choose to die, Colin Brewer, Dr. Colin Brewer is a friend of mine, he was involved in some research, and a massive, something like 90% of people have always said the doctor to inject for them.
Thank you so much for that information. Thank you, both of you, for your stories. Sara telling us about Andrew and the wonderful life he led, but also the fact that he had choice in how he did pass, and that he could make choices as to how he spent that final day. And Alex, thank you so much for explaining your condition and telling me about what's happened, the experience you've been through, and the misunderstandings or the strong opinions that came with that diagnosis, but also explaining the relief that you got when you got that green light, and that now you are enjoying your life, and you can have a better quality of life as a result of having that choice in your life.